To episode 47 of Divergent Dialogues. We're super excited to have a special guest, Sheldon Gay, with us today. Welcome, Sheldon.
Hey, how are you all? Thank you so much for having me on.
That's so good. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a little bit late over there in the US at the moment. I think in nighttime, is it?
It's yeah, it isn't in the nighttime. It's still early evening, but yeah, it's been a long day, but we're good. I'm excited. I'm pumped for this conversation.
That's all good. Well, my bedtime's like 7 p.m. So,
Okay, then
um,
it is and with that reference, it is late
um,
here.
but yeah, but I'm a weirdo. I get up at like 4 or 5 a.m. So yeah,
Me
but
too.
yeah. So, but anyway, for context, awesome. So, Sheldon Gay is an entrepreneur, speaker, and host of the I Must Be Buggin' podcast. Is a leading advocate for gifted and neurodivergent people, especially those from melanated and marginalized communities. His lived experience empowers him to help people become curious about their minds, foster community, as well as experience peace and joy through authenticity. Sounds so
Yeah,
beautiful. I love
yeah.
it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean that's the work. I mean, not to kind of subvert any of the questions that you have in mind, but I literally just got off a call. There's a call that I join every month for people who are family members of those who are living with psychosis. And so a big part of one, this community, but also, like I said, just doing the work for them is making sure that people are remaining curious. One of the things that came up in today's call was, parents who are seeing their loved one, their child, usually, right, change, and how do you interact with them, right? But a lot of that has to be about making sure that you're being curious about what's happening in their experience as opposed to just kind of like fighting them on what may not be a shared reality experience, and finding joy through all this because look, like, you know yeah, life will throw you a lot of different things, and if you can't find joy in it, it gets tough pretty quickly. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And it sounds like that's really important work that you're doing. And
yeah.
yeah, we were just talking before actually the podcast recording where in life sometimes it's like a laugh or cry sort of moment. And
Mhm.
we're all folks who tend to try and laugh.
Yeah.
So we're feeling very
Definitely.
silly this morning, so you can kind of imagine where we're at during this recording. But yeah, it's pretty hectic times, I think, and everyone's feeling it. But yeah, so awesome. I'm really curious, Sheldon. How has your experience as a late identified gifted Black man shaped your understanding of neurodivergence?
Yeah, great question. It continues to impact, my experience of, what neurodivergence means. I mean, I tell you, I just also, what was it, yesterday? I think I had a call with, this other Black man who wanted to talk to me about his work and kind of getting involved. And one of the things that I shared with him was that, I went over 40 years of my life having no idea about, the fact that my mind was actually working differently. And this goes back to what I was saying, what you read in my bio, right? Is this thing about being curious, and why is it that, you know I'm different? Why is my experience so different? I know as a Black man, um, there are a lot of things as it relates to particularly giftedness and why I wasn't identified earlier that I recognize as, parts of the system, particularly here in the US, right? So, like, for me, one of the biggest, simplest examples is, when I was in, excuse me, elementary school, there were a lot of kids who were tested to, for example, there was a test that we were given to decide who would go to algebra and who would go to pre-algebra. And I apparently tested well enough on it that I I outpaced some folks who had already had like algebra classes. I had no idea what was going on really, or at least I had no experience with algebra, right? And so I was just kind of like figuring things out. Um, and yet, what ended up happening is there were a lot of students who were pushed into algebra. I was met by a teacher later who said to me, Sheldon, look, you really did well in that test. And again, I was super confused. I was like, the test that I just like, did my best to fill in answers for. And he's like, yeah, like you did so well on it, but we want to hold you back. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't make any sense, right? And so there are many stories like that as I reflect upon my life, and why it took me so long to know that I was gifted or neurodivergent, more broadly, because these were stories that then for me started to establish, oh, I guess I'm not as smart as other people. I guess that I'm not this thing. And so, when I think about, my experience and the work that I'm doing now, I hear a lot of people's stories for how they're later identified as well. And a lot of that stuff boils down to the experiences that are typically being showcased don't reflect little Black boys or little Black girls or uh, physically disabled folks who maybe. I was talking to somebody the other day, and actually, this episode hasn't come out, but there's a guy's on my podcast I just recorded with who has cerebral palsy, and he was saying how in school people assumed that because he had a physical disability, he also could not perform in school. And so, anyway, this is all really to just speak to the fact that I have to be not only aware of what it means to be neurodivergent, but I also have to be much more aware of the how that impacts me differently because of how I present. And so that is why I'm so passionate about, like I said, doing the work that I do for the groups that I try to focus on.
Yeah. So did they give you any reasoning as to why they held you back, despite how you performed in the test?
I mean, the short story was that, they told me they didn't want me to be in the class and not perform. And then, I guess like they didn't want me to struggle. And which at a, at this point doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? Because
Yeah.
even if somebody, especially at that age, right, like if you get a child into a classroom and excuse me, forgetting even how I outpaced people who had algebra, but like just thinking about it, if you had a child who was struggling, you can always move them to pre-algebra, right? Like that's not an impossibility. Um, but so that, like I said, that doesn't really add up. But that was the only reason that they gave. For me, I know that there's a lot of history, there's a lot of research that demonstrates that um, similar behavior for Black children or otherwise melanated children, is seen in a more negative light, or there's a lot of like, I don't know if this is real, right?
Mm.
I've had stuff in all the way through grad school where people thought I was cheating on tests that didn't make any sense. I'm like, cheating? Why would I ever need to cheat on these tests, right? As I say that, honestly, it gets me, I can feel that emotion coming back because why would you question me, but you don't question, this classmate of mine? And so, yeah, that's the only reason that they ever gave was just that they were worried about me struggling, which again, that doesn't really make sense. So
No, no, yeah, because it's discrimination, really, and
yeah,
making assumptions, yeah, based on
mm-hmm.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
because
Yeah, and
it's interesting that the concern wasn't anything about you potentially getting bored because you had succeeded in this exam. Like that wasn't on the radar.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I was just about to say, let me not forget that. Then what was the subsequent ramifications of that? Was that then I spent the rest of elementary school and times even in high school being extremely bored, right? And so I was bumping up against teachers. I remember again one of my reflections back on elementary school and kind of like, oh, this was my kind of giftedness coming out is that I would sit in math class and first of all, for me, sometimes to focus, it's easier for me to actually look away. And so I would be sitting in class and I would be listening, but I might be looking out the window or I might be looking at the wall. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't like, but not looking directly at the teacher. And they used to love to try to catch me. Hey, okay, Sheldon, what is, what is X? Let's just use that as an example. And I'd look like, oh, it's 10. I don't know. They'd be like, right? And this would be seen again in me as sort of this like defiance or this trying to show the teacher up, right? And it's like, no, like you all have created a scenario where first of all, like this stuff is not, I'm outpacing where you all are. And second of all, like, the fact of the matter is that I understand the material. And so if you're going to ask me, just because again, you might be able to kind of catch somebody else, wrong-footed as it were, you're not going to do that to me. And so I'm just answering your question. You've kind of created the scenario. If you had actually put me in the class that I should have been in, I would have been much more challenged, and maybe wouldn't have these kinds of conversations. But the system doesn't think about that, right? The system just kind of reinforces a lot of these different things that it then cause challenges. And the last very quick thing that I'll just share is that excuse me, I just had someone on my podcast and we were talking about how oh gosh, wish I remember the numbers, but there is some large percentage in the US of the prison population that is neurodivergent. And
40.
one of the things so that's it. I think the number was even higher, but like let's just go with that, right? So like
so that, ADHD right? Specific. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. So and that let's even right. Let's just even stick with ADHD specifically, right? Because that's still an amazingly high number. But what it speaks to is this thing about we have people who are, basically on this conveyor belt to prison because of how they show up in a classroom, right? They're being pathologized, they're being stigmatized, excuse me, when if we were seeing them differently and seeing how they process things differently, giving them whatever, just different ways of actually approaching the material, a lot of that behavior all of a sudden doesn't become, problematic. It becomes an opportunity to see them show up and show out, as it were. And so, yeah, like I said, I know in particular for folks like me, like I can, lots of kids will get frustrated in school when they kind of outpace the material, but that then for, again, somebody who looks like me is going to be something that is taken as an affront. Again, there's plenty of studies that we can talk about as it relates to that. But yeah, so that's that. Thank you for mentioning that, because I was just thinking about that too. Is that's exactly what happened, is that it created tension for several years.
And I feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy for them almost, because they put you in that class that creates a sense of boredom, and then there is no challenge. Your way of paying attention is to look away, so you're the defiant, disengaged kid already, and it's you're bored, so you start to click your pen, you start to draw or anything just to stimulate yourself so you can stay sitting in that chair and be a good kid.
Yes.
You become the kid that they've already pegged you as, the naughty boy. And I think it's really horrible, because it does often lead to prison, because you're being treated like a kid who is just disruptive, disengaged, defiant, all those things, when you're not. But when you're treated that way for so long, there's a point where you start to think, well, fuck it. If I'm getting in trouble for it, I may as well do it.
Yeah, no. I mean, again, there's so many different examples of myself and friends who would, if every single day you come in, you're prepared for people to basically pick on you, right? To see, I mean, I literally can think of times when I was sitting there, I wasn't the one talking. There were two, frankly, white kids. Two of my white friends were standing, like, sort of sitting next to me in class, who are the ones talking. I'm the one that gets called on, called out or whatever. And I'm like, I literally haven't even said anything, right? I may have overheard them and I might have chuckled, but they're the ones actually talking, right? But why is it that? So if every day that that's what's going to happen. One, that just is going to impact your ability to show up in class in a certain way. But certainly after a certain point, you may start to like, push buttons and kind of because, and kind of like act out because, I was having a conversation with someone recently about, one of the toughest things about being a child is your lack of agency. And we know as humans, when we don't feel like we have agency, it's kind of like backing an animal into a corner. And what does that want to feel like for them? Well, they start to do anything to feel like they've got the breathing room. And like I said, I know that, yeah, these are things where you start to ask yourself, let's take a step back and look at the system that we've created here, as opposed to how this one, person is, behaving, let's just say, right? And getting much more curious about that. So yeah, like I said, we could talk about all this for days, believe me. But yeah. So
Yeah. So we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious,
mhm.
what are some common misconceptions about neurodivergence within Black communities, especially for men, that you'd like to change?
Yeah. Wow. Let me find my way to the answer here. But when I say wow is because I was just watching this popular clip from this popular podcast the other day, and it hurt me, like just hurt my heart, because it could have been so much better. There were two black men talking, and one of the guys, he's trying to talk about his childhood experience, in school, and he's trying to say, like, kind of talk about the same things we're talking about now, right? That um he was kind of bored in class and yada yada yada, right? But where it hurt my heart was that he said, well, like I was autism adjacent. And I say it hurt my heart because there was this fear, like what is, I don't even know what autism adjacent even means, right?
Yeah, me
But
either.
like, why couldn't you just be autistic, right? Either you are autistic or you're, like, if you want to use that label in any way, like claim it, right? And I think what it spoke to is that in a lot of Black and in other, like, melanated communities, is that there's kind of two main reasons why stuff like that happens. One is that there is this lack of knowledge about what the different labels mean. And I mean, I guess that's sort of a true statement just in general, but there's even a there's less information more broadly about what these things mean, right? Because you know, one, we don't get diagnosed, due to cost, due to people, again, just taking our behaviors and just saying they're being a problem child, as opposed to, wait a second, for little Jimmy over here, we sought, accommodations for them. Why are we not doing that for Sheldon? Why are we telling Sheldon to go to the principal's office, right? So there's this lack of knowledge for a number of different reasons, but then there's also this part where, frankly, there are enough things that are on our shoulders, so far as, how we are expected to behave in public and in certain spaces. And, there's people who talk about basically like, we don't want to have this extra burden tossed upon us, right? So I think we all know, again, more broadly as neurodivergent people, especially when you get to adulthood and you're like, do I disclose my diagnosis at work? And, what does that mean for me? Well, take all of that and add, some multiple on top of it when your desire to ask for, if they thought that, whatever, Jane is lazy for asking for this, how much more lazy do you think that they would assume that, I am, because of what was already a stereotype, associated with it. And so the misconceptions, I just want to make sure that I kind of like ground us in that. But I think that there's a lot of misconceptions, around, again, what a lot of these things mean. I think a lot of times we've been calling, it's not like all of a sudden, Black people became neurodivergent, like whatever, 2020, right? I think we've had a lot of terms and a lot of ways of describing it that, just now we're like, oh, that's what that means. Like, that's ADHD. that's autism, that's whatever. So I think where a lot of misconceptions come from is um, one about us, but two, just us about what the terms mean is basically based in ableism, right? So a lot of people who um, are saying, I know there's a lot of people who are afraid to even attach a label to themselves because, again, it's like, oh, I'm not. That's what the whole like autism adjacent thing. It's like I'm these things, but I'm not that. It's like, well, what do you mean, right? Um, so there's that. But I think, one of the things that we need to adjust the experience of as neurodivergent people, but particularly as Black men, is that there is no desire for information, that we don't experience these different neurotypes, I'm sorry, and that, there is, I know particularly as men, one of the biggest challenges is the emotional piece. So for those of us who are more emotionally sensitive, who are, more empathetic, there can be a challenge in owning that. One, because people won't, people be like, you can't be, emotionally sensitive. That makes you weak, or you can't be emotionally sensitive. Men aren't emotional, like you don't even have the capacity. And it's like, what do you, when you grow up with somebody telling you you don't have the capacity, I mean, I'll tell you, like, that was one of my biggest challenges. It's funny because now for me, you know, what has been shared with me is that, one of my greatest gifts is not, if not frankly, my greatest gift is my ability to, empathize and to really understand how people work. But, and I've just had to own it because I've had a lot of people throughout my life that are kind of like, when I've shared different insights, they've like blown it off because I'm a man, and I'm like, okay, yes, I'm a man, but that doesn't mean that this insight isn't true. And so I think, again, there's this thing about understanding the full context of how um, we're grappling with these different things, and to accept the fact that there can be Black men who are neurodivergent, and that from an intersectional piece will also mean that there are challenges with them expressing the fullness of what it feels like to be neurodivergent. Even beyond the sensitivity, I'll just say very quickly, like the processing speed. You know, again, you've got to, as a man, you've got to be on point. You've got, like, anything that signals that you are not the peak of the peak at everything, right, is a challenge. And so the masking and the hiding of talents, even like that. I said that was the last thing, but very quickly, even that from a historical point of view, one of the challenges as well is that, here in the U.S., there's a history, due to the history of slavery. What was I watching? I was watching some show the other day that just made me really reflect on this. But it was like, they didn't even want us to read. It was illegal for us to be able to know how to read. So imagine being a gifted person, right? And you're picking up on all this stuff. I mean, the level of masking that is needed at that point is immense. But that is something that to this day has carried forth, where people are like, don't show out too much because it makes you stick out. It's the what is it, the tall poppy syndrome kind of a thing, right? And that's again more magnified because now it's not just people might not like you, it's that people will want to actually like cause you physical harm, right? And so hopefully that hopefully people can follow that thread somewhere. Maybe there's multiple threads in there, right? So like, yeah.
We love all the threads.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you brought up masking, and, I think like when you are, have other intersectional experiences or from other minorities, like it's not just masking your neurodivergence. Like there can be the code switching,
Yes.
yeah. So I guess, I mean, it wasn't on the question list, but you brought it up, so I thought I might just throw that in there.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I'll just say very quickly, definitely code switching is one of those things that I was talking with, friend and mentor, Dr. Joy Lawson Davis, and one of the conversations we had was about the fact that, yeah, code switching is like another talent, right? To be able to even recognize, okay, what language and language structure do I need to use in this scenario to keep me safe? And be able to do it like that. But the necessity, because again, this is not something, you know, that is just for fun, right? This is about, survival and even just about being able to build community, I'll say, right? Because one of the things that is key is that when you stick out in any scenario, if I, I'm from Philadelphia. If I, whenever I came back to Philly and I was missing out on whatever the latest, whatever slang was, right? Like I stuck out. And that means that I would have an opportunity. My opportunity to make friends was diminished, right? Like I'm like simplifying this, right? But this is the real thing, right? So like, excuse me, just realizing that again, as neurodivergent people, our minds are going to work differently. The jokes that we tell are going to be different. The things that we notice are going to be different, right? And so, being able to hold all of that and navigate that is non-trivial. I'll just say that. So
Yeah, no, I reflect back to when I was younger in high school and I was so out of sync with like the current lexicon of what was in and what was out. And it's like I just catch up and then they'd be like, oh, that's old. Like that's not cool
right,
anymore. I'm like, oh my God, I just got it. Like I just got it down pat and now it's changing again. And I'm like, what is going on?
yes, yeah,
Yeah, but obviously different situation.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
it does exclude you socially
Mm-hmm.
because you can't join in. Or you're
Yeah,
like I'd literally be like, what are you talking about? I have no idea anything, and back in the day we didn't
yeah,
have Google to sit there and go, oh,
right,
what does
right,
this
right,
mean?
right.
It's yes, I am that old. Like so
Same here, same here.
yeah, it does exclude. And yeah, I think there was something that you brought up which was really important because we talk about masking and unmasking and all this kind of thing, and there's a difference between masking by choice and masking for
Mm-hmm,
safety.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And there are some people who may not have a choice because it is about staying safe, and
mm-hmm,
not being harmed or not being persecuted or punished. So
mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's a really important difference to bring up, particularly when we're talking about unmasking. Like I think, when I first kind of got into the space, I'm like, yeah, let's all unmask and da 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 da. And it's like, yeah,
Right, 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 right.
but which is the ideal. Like that's what I advocate and hope for. But also
Yes.
understanding that it's not that simple and easy for everyone, depending on their intersections, their experience, their culture, where they live. So yeah, unfortunately, everyone doesn't necessarily have that freedom to make that choice and to go through that process. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Privilege. It
yes, it
definitely
is a
is
privilege.
privilege. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
100%.
And I think that gets lost a lot, at how privileged you are if you do have the freedom and the safety to unmask. As hard as it is, it's still hard to do, even with that privilege, but nonetheless, it's a privilege.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I will affirm the fact that, right, we're not saying that things are easy for
Mm.
folks or whatever
No,
like that. It's just,
definitely not.
oh, pie in the sky, right? But as they say, there are levels to this, right? And I can definitely you know uh tell stories about stuff like that where you see very excuse me, very very clearly um the difference in outcomes and access to spaces, um that those kinds of things end up meaning. So
Yeah. Um, all right. I'll try and get my brain back on track. But sorry to listeners, I'm a little bit sick right now, so my brain is doing the neurodivergent thing. That's all good. We'll get there. We got an awesome guest, so really lucky to have Sheldon here today to keep it going.
yeah,
Um, So, we've touched a bit on this in terms of education, so maybe we could focus a bit more on mental health. So, in what ways
Mhm.
do you think intersectional neurodivergence is overlooked in current like mental health or educational settings or systems? Yeah.
Yeah, gosh, another question that like we could do this whole episode on, and
Yeah, I
that
know. Sorry, I did pick some big
no,
ones in
no, no, no. This is great though, and this time I'm gonna try to keep the spider's web a little bit more compact here. But um, I'll just say for me, mental health in general, right? I think there's a as it relates to neurodivergence has a lot of work to do. I have been continually surprised how many people who are allowed to call themselves therapists and psychologists don't actually know a whole lot about excuse me different neurotypes, right? And I will also say to that end, I've been in therapy for many different, for I don't even know how many years, but so many years. But the vast majority of that time has been unhelpful or harmful because they didn't understand either they didn't understand giftedness or they didn't understand what to do with it. And so there were a lot of times when, and upon reflection, it was like, excuse me, this thing was pathologized. Like I was like, one of the simple examples I just say to people is, you know, in general, right, for any of us that have pattern recognition abilities, that's not always catastrophizing, right? That's not, but if you see somebody who's consistently like, oh, I connected these dots, all of a sudden, if you don't kind of understand, there might be something else here, you are pointing this person in the direction of like, stop that. But it's like, I could no more stop pattern recognition, than I could stop, blinking my eyes, right? Like that just you're asking me to do something that's not really possible. So I just like that's just a really important, point to make. And sorry, just to make sure that I clearly answer your question, can you just repeat it one more time? Because
Um,
I'm rounding it out, but I want to make sure
that's so good.
yeah.
Oh gosh. So the question was, in what ways do you think intersectional neurodivergence is overlooked in
Mhm.
current mental health systems?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thank you. So yes, and so to round it out, right? Excuse me. The This makes it even more important, as more people, again, melanated and marginalized communities utilize therapy more than we have in the past. Um, a lot of times, the folks that we're going to don't look like us, don't sound like us, don't really understand our lived experience, and so you show up and again, if I told that story about what happened with the algebra test or whatever to a lot of folks, if you, and I'm trying to think back what happened the first time I told that to like a therapist, but I know that there are people who have the experience of telling a similar story, and the therapist says to them, "Oh, well, they were just looking out for you, right? Like this," and it's like, "What? Do you, no, 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 no. That's not. They weren't looking out for me, right? What was going on here was that this is a systemic thing, right? And so it's really, really important for people to be doing the work to understand these other lived experiences and how they may show up, for them, because you can't really help someone navigate their mind if you don't understand the context of their mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's why actually I just on my website added a list of um, therapists for like melanated and marginalized people, both here in the US and in Canada. I didn't compile all the lists, but I have showcased them. There's a few websites for, Black therapists, for Latin therapists, for LGBTQ therapists, like all this different stuff, because um, it is really, really important for us to have people who can understand this experience. And um, I told you I was going to keep this compact, but bear with me because this story, I had to tell this story. I loved this example. Very quickly, I was watching a video, and dang, I wish I remembered his name, but there's a popular um, content creator. It's this black guy. He wears really long dreads, and most of his stuff is about linguistics and like helping people understand what the real meaning of words are, yada yada yada. And maybe I'll share it, share the clip with you. We can kind of
Yeah.
maybe put it in the
So I have
show
to
notes.
pause
But
for a second. You just activated one of Tina's special interests. I just saw like the spark in her eye light up. So I just had to acknowledge that for the people that can't
When that was
see
burning me nothing, I
Tina's
was
face right
like,
now.
"Oh,
Sorry
send
to
me
okay,
interrupt you,
nothing."
okay,
Sheldon.
okay, okay. Well, then I will definitely share the clip. But the but the actual clip itself is the title of it was "Love Me in a Gay Way." So you watch the clip, and the short story is that he was talking about his friend who transitioned. I don't know however long ago. It's not really important, but was born identified as a boy and now recognizes themselves as being a woman. And so they identify as a woman who dates men. Excuse me. So this is all to get to the point where he talks about how she was having some really good connections with people, but he, there was something missing. He said, well, it sounds like these are great, connections. And they said, but yeah, I think that they love me as if I am like a tomboy girl, as opposed to, you know, that like there's this, that this is a gay relationship. And there's that fine point there that if they aren't able to see you and interact with you in your full humanity, your full set of identities, it won't resonate in the same way, right? And I share that because again, someone showing up and you may see me as quote unquote smart, but until you understand how many like ideas are running through my mind, until you understand, the experience of, I mean, again, even just with the algebra test, like imagine being a child and outpacing people on a test that you don't really don't know anything about, right? And what that feels like and what it means to every day be kind of interacting with that kind of experience. It's not just a book smart kind of a thing. And so it's really, really important that we have people who understand how all these threads come together. So thank
Yeah,
you for indulging me.
oh, that's so good. That's so good. And yeah, sorry for interrupting. I was like, I have to say this because I just like
No,
Tina's like,
no,
ooh.
no,
Uh,
no, no.
but I have a few thoughts. I think my brain's fine, like my Vyvanse has finally kicked in, and my brain's finally like on somewhat some cylinders. But what I was going to say is that I have a friend, Vera, who's actually been on the podcast. And they talk with me a lot about their experiences, living in Singapore and being from a minority community, and reflecting on my practice, my private practice, and the way I work. And like if I look at my caseload, majority of the people on my caseload are white folks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And that kind of made me think, what is it, obviously I'm white, but beyond that, like what is it about my website or how I show up,
mm-hmm,
that like maybe, like I'm not saying I'm unsafe, but clearly there's people from differing backgrounds that aren't necessarily gravitated to come and work with me.
mm-hmm,
Um, so just thinking about that. And the other thought was that that there's thoughts are a bit scattered today. But it reminded me of when so I'm a social worker by trade, and I
mm-hmm,
think that social workers as therapists, like we're quite aware of the systemic challenges, and also like quite sensitive to the isms like ableism, racism,
mm-hmm,
all these. So I think that we probably have a bit more of a tendency to pick up these systemic issues and these other intersectional experiences. But I remember when I used to teach at a university, and one of the students was saying, oh, well, if I'm working with someone from a different cultural background, like, what do I do? Like, they were like quite panicked, like, oh, I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing. Like, what do I do? What do I do?
mm-hmm,
And I said, listen, be curious,
Yeah.
Don't pretend to know if you
Yeah.
don't, and don't make assumptions. Don't make
Yeah.
assumptions. Like,
Hmm.
don't, like, for goodness sake, do not say things based on stereotypes.
Hmm.
Literally, like, this person may be like, this may be the first time for them
Yeah.
experiencing someone, zipping it, listening to them, and being curious
Hmm.
about their experience.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think people appreciate that so much more than a white person trying to seem like they know it all and like be really cringe. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I thank you for sharing that. One, just unto itself, like I literally, my body, there's a somatic response happening right now, like that just is effervescent, I'll say, right?
Oh, yeah.
And what it also reminds me of is, my work that I do in schools. I remember I was talking in a school, I don't know, a year or so ago, and I was there speaking about how their teachers and staff could just create a more neuro affirming environment. And long story short is that one of the teachers raises their hand and they're like, basically like, how do I, deal with this autistic student in my class who just is like whatever's giving them problems. And I just said to them essentially the same thing. I said, I'm going to tell you the most important thing, particularly as a child, is for someone to see you. So if you can just start with just being present with them and sitting with them, I promise you the doors will open up. Like it wouldn't be appropriate for me to even to give you whatever, even a list of 10 things for, to calm autistic. Like that's not the main thing that you can do that applies to any scenario is exactly what you said. It's just be curious, to listen, right? And it's sad how few of us are experienced at having that. Just
Mm.
someone sit there and listen and not assume that they know what we're thinking or feeling or how to solve our problem or whatever. And so yeah, I definitely, I mean, I would just say, again, in the scenario that you referred to, certainly, absolutely, like I cannot like ring the bell enough on that. But it also just reminded me again of just the work that we're doing that's around this like neurodivergent piece of understanding someone's mind and just again just being able to sit with them and get curious about
I
Yeah.
I think back to working in big organizations, doing the cultural competency training in
it. Mm-hmm.
particular, and we learn all these things that we're supposed to do to help people from other backgrounds, feel safe, comfortable, yada yada
Mm-hmm.
yada. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember distinctly thinking during those trainings, like, but what if they don't identify with their culture in that way, like things like around, especially for neurodivergent people as well,
Mm-hmm.
things around eye contact, where
Mm-hmm.
in Indigenous Australian culture, that like eye contact is this, it's not something they're comfortable with. But what if the person I'm talking to actually is, and that they
Yeah.
feel a bit uncomfortable because I'm being all weird about eye contact?
Yeah.
That's what someone told me in a cultural
Yeah.
competency training. And
Yep.
I think that if we try and be culturally competent, then I personally feel that we're actually at risk of making people feel like they're doing their culture the wrong way,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
it's like it's something else they've mucked up, or whatever, because here I am, from the mental health space. It's like I'm the
Mm-hmm.
professional, and here
Right.
I am being culturally competent, but they're
Mm-hmm.
all like, so it's like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
I'm not even doing my culture properly. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to, say these words or think this thing or eat this
Mm-hmm.
food.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that, yeah, in the absence of curiosity, not only are you going to get it wrong, but you could, in my opinion, potentially do harm,
Yeah.
because you're just working off a bunch of assumptions, and you've put a person in a box that they might not be comfortable
Yeah.
in.
The other
Yeah.
thing to consider is that often these trainings is like a 1 hour online click through.
Hmm.
And it's like, this is cultural competency. So you're gonna,
Yes.
for all of the cultures and
Yes.
experiences in the world, you're gonna learn it in 1 hour and be competent. And it's just, yeah, like, I mean, and the other thing is, often I don't even think that they're necessarily made by people of different cultures. Like, it's just like
Mm-hmm.
a HR
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which anyway, like, I could like go on for the on
Yeah,
this for days.
that's a whole nother episode. Yeah.
It's a whole episode. But I will say, there are a few books that I have read that I found to be quite helpful. I'm terrible with names, but one of them is called White Supremacy and Me. And I
Mm.
found that book to
Yeah.
be really helpful to reflect on myself and my privilege. And there was another one. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Oh,
Yeah,
I
I'm
can't remember
terrible
the
with
name of the
names.
book, but
Mhm.
it was I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. I think her name's is it Malala? And
Oh, yes.
yes, and I know
Displaced
she
something.
yes, display yes, yes, yes. So it's like a collection of stories of women that are refugees or have been refugees in different countries, and I think that was a really big eye opener for
I
me.
think
And
it's just called Displaced.
is it called Displaced? Yeah. So I think, like, obviously being a white person growing up in Australia, I
Mhm.
have had a particular experience, but being curious and understanding the diversity of experiences, like, that's where I've learned. And, I've had the privilege of knowing people like yourself, Sheldon, or
Mhm.
other folks who've been really generous in sharing their culture or their reflections, which has, yeah, been excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All the different things. One, if we're everybody else got to make a suggestion for a book, so I'm just going to point behind me for those who can't see. But there are several books there I probably would suggest. But Black disability politics would definitely be one for folks, particularly of this, your listeners to check out. It is by, again, a bad name, Sammy Shaw. So please do check that out.
Yeah. I
The
might link
other
these in the show notes. Yeah.
would be, yes, please do. The other thing I would just say really quickly is my one of my favorite terms is Shoshin, and if those folks are not familiar, it's Shoshin. A lot of folks in like Buddhist circles will be familiar with it, but basically it refers to having a beginner's mind, and so it's really really important. Even if you have whatever however many degrees or whatever, been doing this work for 20 years, to always be able to show up with this beginner's mind of like, I don't know you, right? Like, I don't know your experience. I don't know how your cultural context influences how you're showing up, right? And being okay with that, because that's going to produce the best way forward. And then the last thing is that we all have to also make space for um, error and then for repair. I think that some of the things too is that people get scared of saying anything wrong, um, which I get, but in the best communities, this tool of repair is there. This group that I'm a part of, they've got this entire process for going through what they call oops and ouch. So like ouch is I said something that hurt you, um, and like how do I fix it? And then oops is like, oh, I said this, and I know that I didn't even mean like I didn't even before is I didn't realize this was a problem. Oops is you know, I said something I know is wrong. Let me kind of fix it. But again, this process by which we, find space for repair so that, yeah, like, people are going to step on toes at times, right? Like none of us are perfect. None of us come from the same experiences. But like, if, if people believe that your heart's in the right place and you want to get it right and that you're willing to be accountable for your oopses and your ouches, it will go a lot better. I think a lot of people get caught up in, again, I've been doing this for 20 years. I couldn't possibly be racist. I couldn't possibly be ableist. I'm neurodivergent myself. How can I be ableist? And it's like, you do realize that these systems don't care who's on the other side. Like they are indoctrinating all of us with these things. And so it's very possible for us to be um, you know, utilizing these oppressive tools ourselves. So anyway.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think it's an ongoing process. You know, like we were attuned to a particular, you know, way of thought or being, or, you know, depending on our life experiences. But yeah, I think being open, curious, and yeah, accepting that we don't know it all and we never will.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that humility is really important.
Yeah.
We might wrap it up with this last question.
Okay.
And then, you know, if there's anything that you wanted to plug as well, you're welcome to do that. Um, so how do you personally navigate spaces that weren't designed for your identity or neurotype? Like, have you got any?
It's a great question. And
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I think the best thing is to be very clear about my boundaries, right? I think sometimes we get too caught up again in trying to never experience harm, or like just be completely free of anything that just doesn't make us feel comfortable. And obviously that would be great, right? Like spaces where we feel like we can take off all our hats and not be looking behind our back, like that stuff is great, but that's not everywhere. And so for me, a big thing is about being very clear about my boundaries, so that when something shows up and it doesn't make me feel comfortable to the point where I feel like I've got to kind of draw a line, it's taken a lot of work to get here, but being very clear about like that doesn't work for me, and being clear about why and what that person, you know, needs to do instead is really, really helpful. Because I think sometimes we get there, and because of either a lack of clarity around what our boundaries should be, or a lack of comfort with holding our boundaries, that's where we just go to anger, right? And we just kind of like lash out, or we just completely remove ourselves from something that, if we just said, hey, like, um, you know, if could we turn the lights down in here, right? And so, like, oh shoot, so sometimes somebody will be like, you know what? I don't like the lights on either, but I thought everybody else, you know, I turned them on for everybody else. Right. But if you're not comfortable with, you know, kind of just drawing those boundaries, it can get, and again, from a place of not panic, not fear, but just being comfortable and like, I'm valuable enough to protect. I'm loving, I'm worthy of that level of love. And there are people who will be here to show up for me that way. Like that is how I try to just move through things. I don't have any particular tactics aside from just being very clear about myself and my needs and my ability to communicate that in an assertive but, you know, graceful way.
Yeah. No, 100% agree with that. Yeah. It is a journey, as you said. It's a
Mm-hmm.
another ongoing journey with with that. But I think, yeah, it's like if we have clarity, then we're able to help others to hopefully have clarity as well. Yeah. But
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, thank you so much, Sheldon. Yeah, I just wanted to give you a bit of space, if there's anything that you wanted to plug, you know, for yourself, or the things that are coming up for you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. First of all, again, thank you so much for this opportunity to share space with you all. It's been lovely, and you know, hopefully, your listeners can appreciate all the threads. Like I said, I as much as I tried to keep, like I said, things compact. But yeah, if you'd love to hear more of my work, if you'd love to support my work, the best place to go is my website, which is Sheldon Gay is buggin, BUGN.com. There you can learn more about bringing me out to speak. You can reach out to me if you want me to come on your podcast. You can see my merch. You like this pillow, again, for those who can see, but for those who can't, behind me is this pillow. It says labels don't have to feel like pathology. So I have some cool, you know, merch on there as well. And then, like I said, I have some other resources. So like the best thing is to kind of check my website. You know, I'll be speaking at a couple of different places over the next couple of months, but I'll say that the main thing right now is, yeah, connect with me. You know, share your story with me. I'm always happy to connect with new folks who are curious about this work.
Excellent.
Oh, and
Thank
just
you
very
so much.
quickly too,
Oh, yeah.
I sorry,
That's
very
good. Go
quickly.
for it.
And I also do, I'm doing coaching. This is funny. Sorry. I'm doing coaching as well. So if you are somebody who is like just discovering, particularly their giftedness, but any, neurodivergent like self-discovery, if you're on that journey of finding peace and joy and authenticity, please go to my website, reach out to me. Would love to work with you. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sheldon. It's been great to have you on the podcast.